Hi, everybody. We are back with the Salty Science series. And I wanted to just start off the night with a little bit of a recap and formulating where we're going from here. So we recently published a book on Great Salt Lake biology. This is one of our students, Kara Kornhauser, who's now a grad student in Alaska. This is her. She was an author in one of the chapters. But we thought it would be really fun during this strange time. We're all meeting online anyway. Maybe we could focus on the book and sort of clusters of authors who worked on this book project with us. And so tonight's theme is birds, and we have three of the authors who led chapters on birds of the lake. But I wanted to mention just sort of an overview of the book before we get going, so you know where we've been and where we're going with this. So the first couple of chapters set the stage. The book is, the subtitle of the book is A Terminal Lake in a Time of Change. And when we first envisioned this, we thought about climate change, that we're writing about the biology of Great Salt Lake during this really important time, this crucial time. And the more we got into the literature and the more we thought about it and the more we read what our authors were writing, the more we thought that consumptive uses and water diversions were a really important part of this scenario. So we started a couple weeks ago with the first session. Sarah Neill spoke about this water development consumptive use chapter, and then I spoke on climate change with respect to Great Salt Lake. And another thing that sort of crept up on us when we were working on this project was the relationship of humans with the lake. And so Carla Trentelman spoke about that last time. So that was super interesting. And we decided tonight's work would be on the birds. So we're going to highlight Mark Bell, who works with Mike Conover and co-wrote this chapter on pelagic birds, and Ella Sorensen, who wrote who was the leading author on the Shorebird chapter. John Neill, who's on that chapter, is also in the audience today, who, or I should say up here on the panel where he can answer questions as well. And Ashley Kijowski is going to talk about the Pelicans, and that also is a really interesting story with respect to Great Salt Lake. Jaimi can lead us into how to link up to get information about the upcoming seminars and such, but we're going to try to highlight each of these chapters in some way, but we've grouped them together in kind of interesting panels so that it's a group of short talks as opposed to one big talk. And that's all I wanted to say with respect to the book. Jaimi was going to put in the chat a link to the book. If you're interested, it's an academic book, so it's pricey. If you're interested in a chapter from the book that you'd like to read, please email one of the authors or email Jaimi and I, and we can send you a PDF of that. Also this week, Jaimi and I wrote an obituary for Great Salt Lake, which was a really interesting writing exercise for a couple of scientists to write in metaphor about a lake who had died. And I know some of you have seen it or shared it, but Jaimi will put that in the chat box, and we can put that in the chat box later as well. So the reason we're concerned is that the situation for this lake is dire. Water is not getting to the lake the way it used to, and between diversions and our expected warming in the Southwest from climate change, we really anticipate that things aren't going to get better very quickly, if at all. So Jaimi and I decided to get people's attention by writing an obituary for the lake. So please have a look at that. The link is in the box. And I think the avian inhabitants of our ecosystem are going to be some of the most visible, I guess, of the population, the most visibly affected. They are really important. This body of water is important to them. And I wanted to shout out that we finally got really good numbers by putting this book out. All the bird people came together, and Ella worked really hard on this, and so did John Neill. And I want to thank you guys for getting us real numbers and good numbers and making the numbers a lot better. So I will turn this over to Jaimi, who will introduce the speakers, but I would just wanted to give that shout out to the process and where we've been and where we're going. Thanks, Jaimi.
I have to remember all of the buttons that I have to push. Can you hear me okay? Everybody's good?
Yeah, and I'm noticing that Oren is in the audience. It's 3 a.m. in Jerusalem. Oren is a scientist who studies the Dead Sea, and I'm really excited to see you here. Oh, Kanan, nice to see you as well. One of our colleagues in math. Wonderful.
You might wonder where you can find all of this after, because we are recording, and later on we will post this on the Great Salt Lake Institute YouTube channel. You'll notice when you search for Great Salt Lake Institute, you're going to find a lot of student videos, but down here I created these playlists, and these playlists you can link on them and see the entire series as it goes along. That's my dog Roscoe, in case anybody needs to meet my dog Roscoe. Yeah. And so I just wanted to start off by talking about some of these funny things that have happened to me over the years at Great Salt Lake. There's been many mistakes that I've had to correct during that time. And I don't know if you can see this right now, but this boat really should not be, like, the hull should not be leaning on the boat ramp to the Antelope Island boat harbor. We made a mistake in, these were kind of low water years, and lots of times you can trick your boat into going into very shallow water if you unhook the boat from the boat trailer and then run it down the ramp pretty quickly and then slam on the brakes when you get into the water. And for whatever reason, somebody slammed on the brakes too quickly, and we had to make a correction with this. And it involved lots of grunting and swearing by the brine shrimp harvesters that I was working with at the time. We did not wreck the boat. This was something that was very easily corrected. And there's other things too, like look at this shirt that we made. We thought it was really great to highlight the flies. The brine flies of Great Salt Lake are really important. And if you'll notice in a close-up, we misspelled institute. And I had printed a couple hundred t-shirts at least, and here it is, the institute. We did correct this with a pin that said Great Salt Lake needs you. So we kind of pretended like we did this on purpose, when really it went all the way to print with this mistake in it. And then my favorite and very most embarrassing was this time when we were christening the Bonneville, which the Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program with Ashley and John Neill, who are panelists today, are a part of. When I was part of this program, we were christening the Bonneville, and I was trying to get people in the picture, and I kept stepping back. You know how you step back to get everybody in the picture, and I kept stepping back, and I fell in the water in the Great Salt Lake Marina. And this was a little bit harder to correct because I got a really nasty ear infection, and I was deaf in one of my ears for a few months. I had to take antibiotics, I had to take antifungals, and the most confusing of all was the yeast infection pills that I was taking, and the pharmacist was very confused at why, when I was a state of Utah employee and I was on workers' comp, that I would be getting yeast infection pills. I did survive, it was corrected, I can still hear. And the reason that I talk about all this and I tell you about my embarrassing stories is that last week 2 weeks ago when we talked about water in our first Salty Science seminar, Sarah Neill contacted me after and asked me to, she told me that she had made a mistake and wanted to correct it. And so we have invited Sarah Neill here to, if you want to put your video on, Sarah, we have invited Sarah here to correct her mistake.
Thank you, Jaimi. I think you need to turn my video on. It's telling me that I cannot.
Oh, I'm sorry. There you go.
Perfect. Thank you. And that was so kind to lead that into with other mistakes also. Let me share my screen. Can everybody see my slide? Hopefully.
Yes, I can see it. It looks good.
Okay, perfect. So yesterday, or 2 weeks ago, I was giving a talk about humans and impacts of water diversions on Great Salt Lake levels. And my last two bullets here got smushed together. And so I want to go over this and correct it. It's always really hard to pull back misinformation once it gets out there, and I never want to be the person to do it. So I was talking about the Bear River Development Act. It was passed in 1999 to develop 220,000 acre feet of surface water. If a new reservoir is built, it's estimated to cost maybe about $1.5 billion. And here's the important part where I made a mistake. If that reservoir is built, we anticipate that Great Salt Lake's level will drop by about 8.5 inches. And 2 weeks ago, I smushed it with this lower bullet saying that if all the water in the whole compact was developed, then we would expect Great Salt Lake level to decline by about 5.5 feet. And those are all modeling estimates, and I kind of gave my talk and got going on autopilot, and I didn't even realize until the next day. And so this is my correction for that mistake. And now you guys get to start talking about birds. So I'll turn it back over.
When I was going through and I was naming all of these talks and these panels, it was about birds, right? We were thinking about birds, and I just kind of off the top of my head started thinking about, oh, Great Salt Lake is for the birds. And then as I was going through all of this, I realized that, you know, for the birds kind of means, it came from this term that's been said to allude to horse droppings that the birds would extract seeds. So kind of the leftovers, kind of this yucky place that their birds are extracting seeds from. And so I thought that maybe 2020, maybe some of us feel like 2020 is for the birds. And so we created this beautiful little ornament with some of our friends at Bowerbird Art Studios. It's an American avocet, and it's really hard to see this, but you can see this little copper, it's a steel bird, and it has a little copper tag that says for the birds 2020, because some of us might think that 2020 has been a little bit hard. But I don't want that to diminish this next person who really is for the birds. Ella Sorensen, I've been in lots of meetings with Ella Sorensen where she's always turns this back to the birds. She always says we need to come back to the birds, and is just this avid person in my life that has taught me to go back to what is important. So Ella Sorensen has had a long time interest in shorebirds. Since 1994, she has worked for National Audubon Society, overseeing all aspects of creating the 3,184 acre Audubon Gilmore Sanctuary on the south shore of Great Salt Lake, including land and water acquisitions, restoration planning and implementation, monitoring, education, field trips, and research. The sanctuary focuses on shorebirds in their mudflat and shallow water habitats. She was the Utah Department of Transportation Legacy Nature Preserve Lead from 1999 to 2004. With Dr. John Cavett at Weber State, she organized 2 shorebird symposiums for wetland managers, agencies, and other interested in learning about shorebirds. She co-authored Utah Birds, Revised Bird Checklist, published in 1985 by the Utah Museum of Natural History with the late Dr. William Bailey. Her writing includes the book Seductive Beauty of Great Salt Lake with photographer John George, a monthly bird feature column for 15 years in the Salt Lake Tribune. Her articles have appeared in Birdwatcher's Digest, Audubon, Birding, and Winging It, and numerous articles in local magazines and newsletters. She was the lead author of the chapter on Great Salt Lake shorebirds, their habitats and food-based, in the newly published book that we're talking about, Great Salt Lake Biology, A Terminal Lake in a Time of Change. And she currently serves as a member of the Tracy Aviary Science and Conservation Committee and the Great Salt Lake Technical Team. And Ella is here live with us. But we have already recorded her video, and I'm going to share my screen with you and hopefully share her video.
Every year, a spectacular hemispheric drama plays out all across North and South America. Every year, over 1 million shorebirds congregate on Great Salt Lake. It is one of the largest concentrations of birds on Earth. Many birds occur on shores, and shorebirds do not always occur on the shore. So, what exactly is a shorebird? Great Salt Lake shorebirds are defined as a large, diverse group of birds that include the following: avocets and stilts, large wading birds with long legs and slender bills. Plovers, which have short, stout bills and forage visually. They pause, scan, locate, then race in pursuit. Sandpipers, snipes, and their allies are a large and varied group. A few examples among the great diversity of species belonging to this group. Marbled godwit, a large wading bird that forages by probing. The majority of the world population stage on Great Salt Lake. Long-billed dowitcher, a medium chunky shorebird that forages in mud with an up and down motion similar to a sewing machine needle. Peeps. Peeps are multiple small similar looking shorebirds, often missed or lumped together in surveys, but each is a different and unique animal with a distinct range, migration, timing, and ecological requirements. Wilson's phalarope. Wilson's phalaropes are small shorebirds with a unique foraging technique of spinning in water to form a vortex, bringing any available microinvertebrates close by. A large percentage of the world's population of Wilson's phalarope stages on Great Salt Lake. 42 species of shorebirds have been confirmed through our study on Great Salt Lake. 31 of them occur annually, and 19 are common. Of these shorebirds, 9 will stay and nest on Great Salt Lake. Shorebird habitat. Dry and shallowly flooded mudflats are uncontestedly the most important habitat for shorebirds. Good news for Great Salt Lake. There are hundreds of thousands of acres of mudflats on Great Salt Lake, so we really don't have to worry about losing shorebird habitat. And lower levels of water in Great Salt Lake may worry many people, but that is actually good for shorebirds because more mudflats are exposed. These are false statements. Not all mudflats provide the necessary ecological parameters that must be met to make productive shorebird habitat. In fact, at any given time, most mudflats on Great Salt Lake are not suitable habitat for shorebirds, and shorebirds simply do not occur on them. For this chapter, we did not use typical traditional habitat types, which are often not appropriate for shorebirds. but rather identified 3 ecological parameters of productive foraging habitat. These are water depth, vegetation or the lack thereof, and the presence of macroinvertebrates. Each of these components forms a continuum, and each species occupies a range along that continuum. Sometimes that range is narrow, sometimes it is broad. Most shorebirds forage with feet planted firmly on the earth, so they occur in water depths less than 7 inches. A few, like phalaropes, are exceptions. Shorebirds are opportunistic and will forage in many depths if food is present, but they tend to show a preference for certain water depths, which is dependent upon the length of their legs, their bill shape and the length of the bill, and also their foraging methodology. The second parameter is vegetation. Processes moving water and salt in Great Salt Lake wetlands drive dynamic responses from the vegetation. The dark blue on this map shows Great Salt Lake at near low elevation, and the light blue show how the lake inundates in existing wetlands as it did in 1987. Resetting the biologic clock, a repeating process for millennia. Great Salt Lake water inundates the adjacent wetlands. Rooted vegetation is destroyed. Waters retreat, leaving vast expanses of salt flat. Vegetation changes are driven by introduction into the system of fresh water dependent on timing, duration, and depth, and the resulting movement of salts within the system. Each shorebird has a preferred vegetation niche. Snipes occur hidden in dense saltgrass. Species like yellowlegs, stilts, and least sandpipers often forage amid scattered vegetation, while species like marble godwits and dowitchers prefer open water. Shorebirds forage mainly on macroinvertebrates. Absence of available food base on mudflats translates to no foraging shorebirds. Specific macroinvertebrate species are dependent upon salinity. Mudflat versus playa. What characteristics define a mudflat or a playa has long been mired in confusion. The confusion has led to an obscuring effect on the important and distinct role playas play as shorebird habitat on Great Salt Lake, especially in spring migration and early summer. The literature was reviewed and input solicited from soil scientists, hydrologists, land managers, academics, geologists, ecologists, researchers, and biologists. The author's conclusions from a wide and thorough discussion is: mudflat consists of a mixture of water and fine-grained soil, usually clay and silt, occasionally mixed with sand. One of the most important and unique landscape features providing foraging and nesting sites for many species of shorebirds, mainly in spring and early summer, are myriad low-lying depressions scattered near the fringes of Great Salt Lake. These are dry much of the year, but when inundated, often receive considerable shorebird use. They draw down through evaporation to dryness in the summer. From an aerial view, playas stand out on the landscape as mostly unvegetated, variable-shaped white features. Species accounts were written after reviewing literature, extensive surveys and monitoring plans, and the author's decades of personal observation. It is our hope that the information included in this chapter will dispel misinformation on shorebirds and their habitats, fill informational gaps, that a greater understanding and appreciation will lead to a better conservation ethic for the millions of shorebirds dependent on a healthy Great Salt Lake for survival. And I'd like to make a special thanks to Anne and Heidi, John, Brian, and Jaimi Butler for their comments. Thank you.
Eared grebes, actually, they got me started and accidentally started my career in Great Salt Lake. I never knew that I wanted to work at Great Salt Lake for my entire career. And it was at Utah State University. I graduated with a fisheries and wildlife degree, and I started working with Dr. Michael Conover. And we were contracted by the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources and the Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program specifically to make sure that these eared grebes to make sure that brine shrimp harvesters were leaving enough brine shrimp cysts for these eared grebes, because they eat 28,000 shrimp every single day, and 95% of their population comes to Utah every year. Now we have between 4 and 5 million eared grebes. The picture that's on your screen that I'm sharing is from the book that Bonnie and I wrote. It's a children's book called The Great Salt Lake Monster Mystery, where these kids are looking for the Great Salt Lake Monster, and instead they find all of these cool science, the nature and the science of Great Salt Lake. This is my favorite illustration. It's by Arlie Landry, who was a student we worked with at Westminster College. Anyway, this is my favorite image. And another of my favorite parts about this is we were trying to imagine the sound of millions of eared grebes that were taking off from Great Salt Lake. And so I asked John Neill, and John Neill is an avian biologist with the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources and Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program, if you don't know him. And I simply sent him an email that said, what do you think it sounds like when millions of eared grebes take off of Great Salt Lake? And this is what came out of it. I imagine the sound of millions of birds taking off at once, their running feet pitter-pattering against the water like raindrops falling back up into the sky. And this wonderful description, I've just always appreciated that a biologist could think about the lake in such terms. And it turns out that right now, just a couple of days ago, these eared grebes are starting to migrate south again. And they do what's called nocturnal migration. And they take off at night. You don't really see them migrating. Hopefully Bonnie's putting a link to kind of the description of these eared grebes, but this is weather radar, watching all of these eared grebes taking off from Great Salt Lake by the millions. And I just have to say that working with Mike Conover, I have a lot of sympathy for Mark right now. Mark is a graduate student, and I fully understand I fully understand the things that Mike has his graduate students doing, because I used to be in those spots. He would ask us to do things like put goggles on so that we could go underwater and see how the grebes, are they picking out the red shrimp? Are they picking out the blue shrimp? And he had us doing all sorts of funny things. So my sympathies, Mark. But Mark Bell, he has always had at least one foot in the outdoors. Growing up with an outdoorsman father and grandfather, he has always enjoyed learning about and observing wildlife. His love and appreciation for wildlife is ever increasing as he learns and experiences more in the field of wildlife ecology. In 2019, he began his PhD in ecology at Utah State University. Since then, he has worked exclusively studying birds who seasonally rely on the wetlands surrounding Great Salt Lake, Utah. Most of his work is focused on ducks that use the freshwater impoundments surrounding the lake for nesting and brood rearing, as well as eared grebes that nest in the same impoundments and stage on the pelagic regions of the lake before migration. And Mark is here to talk about his the chapter that Mike Conover and himself co-wrote, The Importance of Great Salt Lake to Pelagic Birds, Eared Grebes, Phalaropes, Gulls, Ducks, and White Pelicans. So Mark, do you have the ability to talk?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you, yay.
All right, you should be able to see my screen as well. I'll assume that's a yes, yay. Well, thank you for the intro. Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for starting the talk on eared grebes. They're some of my favorite. I too, like you, didn't know that this is where my life would lead, and I guess I still don't know if this is where the rest of my life will go, but I kind of hope so, because I love what I'm learning, and I love Great Salt Lake and the birds that are here that I get to study. Dr. Conover and I wrote this chapter on the importance of Great Salt Lake to pelagic birds, and we included a lot of other birds that got covered in other chapters of the book. So you might see a little bit of redundancy here with what Ella spoke on, and then with some pelicans that Ashley's going to speak on. And so, but hopefully you'll learn a lot of good stuff, even though there's some repetitive items of nature in the items there. Sorry. So to define pelagic birds, these are birds that are found in the open waters of Great Salt Lake. And these would be ones that cannot touch the ground where they're at. These are different than the shorebirds, although we touch on Fowler Ropes, who were also mentioned as shorebirds. Great Salt Lake is a really interesting ecosystem in that it's very simple because it's such a harsh environment, being so saline. Very few species can survive living there. But because of that, it creates a lot of unique opportunities for studying the species that are there, because it makes things very simple, which is what we always try to do as scientists, but this is very difficult to do. So this is an area where it makes it a little bit easier for us. Species that live on the Great Salt Lake have to have an ability to tolerate salt. With the hypersalinity of the water being around 15% salt, the salinity is 15%. If you compare that to seawater that is 3.5% salt, Great Salt Lake is way more salty. So any species that live here have to be able to tolerate that extreme salt load. And that's why you don't find any fish in the lake, because that's just simply too much salt for them to be able to osmoregulate and keep enough water in their bodies to stay alive. There's also a few sources for fresh water. So any species out there on the lake have to be able to travel to places that have fresh water, or be able to make do without sources of fresh water, which eared grebes and other birds can do. They obtain the water they need through metabolism as well as intake of their food sources. And the final challenge is the small items of food that are available. So brine shrimp, most of you are probably aware, are very minuscule. Brine fly larvae and brine flies are also very small. And so a bird that's out there on the lake has to be able to eat many, many thousands. As I believe Jaimi mentioned, approximately 28,000 brine shrimp a day is what's required to sustain an eared grebe. Eared grebes nest farther north than Great Salt Lake and farther north than Utah primarily. There are some who nest in the areas, the wetland areas like Farmington Bay, Ogden Bay, around Great Salt Lake, but most are farther up north, and they come to the lake after they've nested. The parents actually leave the juveniles behind and fly to the lake to stage there in preparation for their fall migration. And then the juveniles, after they learn to fly, come and join the parents, the adults. while on the lake, they come in the end of July, the end of August. They're here for several months, and they go through a molt while they're on the lake. So they're not able to fly, and they simply spend their time eating. They're a diving bird, and they dive very well. And so while they're out here on the lake, they have no predators in the water. Any avian predators they might have, they have the ability of diving, and they can stay under the water for minutes at a time, and they can swim very far while under the water. So they're quite safe while they're on the lake without the ability to fly. And as we mentioned before, they eat approximately 28,000 brine shrimp a day. They arrive on the lake approximately at 350 grams, and they bulk up to twice that in fat. And then a few weeks before their migration, they do some practice flapping. They're observed doing some flapping with their wings, and that kind of helps trigger a physiological response in their body where they burn the fat and put on a lot of breast muscle, and then they're able to migrate. So they migrate from Great Salt Lake all the way down to the Gulf of California in one night, in a single night. And it takes them approximately 10 to 12 hours. And luckily, because we have about that much darkness in December and early January when they typically leave, they usually leave the 1st of December, sometimes the beginning of the year. They have plenty of darkness to make their flight. Next are the Phalaropes that were mentioned before. Down in the bottom right of the screen here, we have, this is a picture I took, that's why it's such a low quality, might be hard for you to see, but this is a flock of Phalaropes out on the open waters of the lake. They fly around in these really tight groups, and they forage together. They are cooperative foragers, so as mentioned, they'll spin in a circle, which creates an upwelling, which brings the brine shrimp up to the surface to where they can pick and eat the brine shrimp. And by doing it together in a big flock, they're able to upwell more at a time. They arrive, the Wilson's Phalarope arrives first on the lake in July and leaves as soon as August sometimes. And the redneck Phalarope is behind them a few weeks to a month sometimes. But they're here at the same time, and they will mix together in these flocks and work together in their foraging. It is interesting, so we always claim that there's millions of birds on the lake at a time. In a single day, the researchers Aldrich and Paul, they counted 500 Wilson's Phalaropes and 500,000 Wilsons and 250,000 redneck Phalaropes in a single day, which, if you know how big the lake is, that's pretty significant to be able to go to more than one place and be able to count that many birds. Very impressive. Next, we have California gulls. They are a little bit different in that they don't actually feed much on the lake. They do some, and depending on the time of year, they will more than other times of the year. As is mentioned here in that third bullet point, in May, there was a study, not this May, but in May of one of the years, a study was performed. They found that the brine shrimp and brine flies made 50 to 70% of the diet. Other times of the year, they are found at landfills and dumpsters and plundering the food left over from humans. As many of us are probably well aware, they can seem like pests at times. But Great Salt Lake is a very important nesting site for these birds. And on Hat Island and Gunnison Island, there's more than 150,000 nesting adults every year. And I might add that other places, there's colonies at Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge, out at the salt evaporation ponds, there's colonies. It seems like they're ever increasing. They seem to be doing pretty well in today's climate. Lots of food for them. And then the one that might surprise some people are ducks. So sometimes when the ducks are observed out there in the fall or the winter, people wonder if the ducks are trying to evade humans, running away from hunting season and just hiding out there fasting on the lake because they'd rather be out there not eating than being shot. But this hypothesis was tested, and it was found that they're actually feeding while they're out there. These common goldeneye, pictured on the left here, are a diving duck, and you can find them on the lake over top areas of the stromatolites. And because they're diving ducks, they have the ability to dive down to the bottom to the stromatolites and pick out the brine fly larvae that are growing there. But then the dabbling ducks, we have these green-winged teal and northern shovelers. They are observed eating brine shrimp and cysts as well, and those are just from the surface. In our chapter, we highlight a few of the threats to these birds. These birds have existed here for a long, long time, although we have seen some changes in their abundances and in their relative abundances spread across different lakes in North America. Interestingly enough, as pictured here in this graph, even though Mono Lake in California, which is a saline and an alkaline lake in California, it's much smaller than Great Salt Lake, but previous to the year 2000, it housed many more eared grebes than Great Salt Lake did, even though it was a smaller lake. It was the lake that they were choosing to go to. But because of water being diverted away for culinary use and for anthropogenic uses, Mono Lake became unusable for the birds in the way of the brine shrimp, and the brine flies were affected by the high salinities. And so we saw a spike or an increase in the amount of eared grebes that were coming to Great Salt Lake in the fall before their fall migration. As was mentioned, at least momentarily before, the brine shrimp that are harvested out of the lake, there is the potential that if too many cysts were harvested from the lake, there wouldn't be enough to regenerate the amount of food needed for the next year, the next year's amount of birds. But luckily, this is monitored very excessively, and it's done very well, so that when the amount of cysts in the water reaches a certain threshold, all harvesting is shut down, and so we can maintain the proper amount, so there's plenty of food for the birds. Another concern is heavy metals. Heavy metals are in the water, and the same as the way the salt collects in a lake over many years, the heavy metals will collect as well. But we also have other things such as the Kennecott mine, which the tailings are allowed to come into the lake, or other heavy metals that are in the waters from sewage and other things from humans. It comes into the lake and they collect here. Mercury is one that's of concern, and it is poisonous for the birds. And selenium is also known to cause troubles in the birds' ability to young birds in being able to incubate and successfully hatch. But interestingly enough, when the two combine, they're believed to make a chemical compound, which makes it so that the mercury isn't able to be used by the body of the birds in a way that is toxic to them. So as of right now, that is not of the highest concern. What is of the highest concern is water diversion. This map here, I find interesting that this is the kind of map that we see of the lake very commonly. This is when the lake was at a very high level, but this is what's pictured on maps all the time. If we lay over, and this is also a picture you saw earlier, and you'll probably see it around, but if we lay over what the lake looks like with current conditions, very similar, this is what the lake looks like at the elevation of 4,192 feet above sea level, and that's only 8 feet less than the larger footprint of the lake. But we see that 8 feet makes a huge difference. Now, the biggest threat to the birds is not that the volume has changed, but that the solutes have condensed, and so it increases salinity. And if the salinity of the water was to reach a higher level, then the cysts or the brine shrimp would no longer be able to hatch or to grow and reproduce, which would then cause a problem with feeding the birds. And this is like what happened with Mona Lake in California. One of the concerns, potential concern, is that the time that the lake reaches some of its lowest levels is in the fall, after all the evaporation from the summer has happened. And that's the same time when the eared grebes lose their ability to fly. And potentially what could happen is it would leave these eared grebes stuck on the lake without the ability to leave and without food. And then also the Great Salt Lake being one of the last bastions for the birds, one of the last lakes that still provides habitat and food for them. If it was to be gone, then where would the birds go? And are there enough places around that could house this many birds? And with that, that's the end. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. The next thing I want to talk about, my kids tell me that I never shut up about them. This is a quote from my 8-year-old daughter, Cora, that I never shut up about pelicans. You can see I have a scarf that's pelicans. You can actually find that on our website too. That's GSLsaltysirens.com. I actually, the first time that I met a pelican at Great Salt Lake, it was dead. And I wondered why this pelican was dead and was preserved and pickled in this salt. And I started looking around and found out that pelicans have been documented in Utah since the 1800s. This is specifically from the Stansbury expedition. They came here and wrote a book in 1850. They didn't count the pelicans like Ashley is going to talk about and that John and Neill have been doing, but they did describe immense flocks of pelicans on this little island called Gunnison Island that's in the middle of the north arm of Great Salt Lake, surrounded by saturated salt water, and there's no fish in the water. They nest there as a safe place. They trade food and fresh water for a safe place without coyotes and humans and other mammals to wreck their little nests that they lay right on the ground. We have been trying to preserve these islands. You'll notice this is from December 15th of 1930. And this is an executive order that I found in the U of U special collections in the Dr. William Bailey collection. Dr. William Bailey, we've heard his name in this talk before. He was a professor at the University of Utah, and he has written many books on the colonial nesting birds of Great Salt Lake. This original executive order was in his collection, and you'll see it's a revocation of Bird Island. Bird Island is another name for Hat Island, but I think it's really interesting that people were trying to preserve these islands since before even 1930. Gunnison Island, where our pelicans are, they actually were able to get that put aside as managed by the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources for pelicans and other colonial nesting birds like the gulls and the herons. That happened in 1977. I was a year old when the legislature approved that, and then by 1980, Gunnison Island was designated for the birds, and people aren't even supposed to go within a mile of Gunnison Island. This is a picture that was taken of me goofing off. I should get in trouble for this because the person I'm riding on my boss's back. His name is Clay Pershawn. He was the manager of the Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program for many years and was a good friend, and I felt like I could kind of goof around. But I think it's pretty cool to see you know, he's basically giving me a ride. I'm so short, and he was such a tall person that we would park our boats on Gunnison Island, like pretty close to the shore. And then the tall people would have to carry all of the short people to shore so we wouldn't get wet and salty and could be comfortable counting pelicans and being out there. And the look on my face is horrible. And this was in 2016. I was very proud because we had just formed a partnership with many people to put some cameras on Gunnison Island. And you'll notice right behind my shoulder, this is not an island anymore. You can see this land bridge that's behind me because water levels are so low in 2016. We started to worry about coyotes and humans and other predators getting onto Gunnison Island. And so Ashley Kijowski, who's going to be talking to us in just a minute after I shut up about pelicans, we started talking about how we could get people involved in Great Salt Lake and in a meaningful and valuable way, not just to be involved, but to collect data for us. And so we put these cameras, we worked with the Department of Natural Resources and the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, their Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program. And we asked Tracy Aviary for some money to fund a live camera. And they did, they funded this live camera. But I don't know what I'm doing when it comes to, you know, the technology that takes getting these camera images from a remote island with no cell service. And so we talked to the Atmospheric Sciences Department at the University of Utah. They're called Meso West. And Meso West agreed. They thought it was a great idea that we should put a camera on Gunnison Island. And that's what we did. Now we have a camera that's live on Gunnison Island. It takes a picture every 3 minutes. And we have students who are using computer technology to analyze these images. And at the same time, we thought, oh, well, you know, there are these motion activated wildlife cameras that people use. Let's put those across the island and see what we can find out about their migration patterns and their breeding behavior. And I mean, whether these predators are impacting their populations, if there's predators out there. First, we had to document these things that were going out there. And now we have this. This is from the chapter that Ashley is going to be talking about in a minute. We have all of these images of you know, our Bonnie likes to call these the dance parties of the pelicans, and B shows how pelicans take selfies of each other. C we can't talk about because we're in Utah, and so I won't even say anything more about that. But C led to D, which is this little egg that's under this pelican. We watch them nesting, enjoying sunsets in E, and even fighting in F. Maybe there's some aggressive behavior that's happening there. To date, we have over 500,000 images that people are helping us look through. And you can find those on Zooniverse. The QR code in front of you, you can click on that and that will take you to Zooniverse, or hopefully Bonnie might add a link in there, or I will later. But you can actually help us. There's over 4,000 people who are helping us around the world analyze these images to tell us more about these pelicans that are very sensitive to disturbance. And we can do this from our computers in our home without disturbing them. And so kudos to Ashley and her crew. And I really, I want to recognize that it's not just Ashley that did this. The authors on this chapter are Ashley Kijowski, John Neill, of course, Adam Wickline, Jessica Swift. I helped a little bit with some of it. Dave Kimberly is a faculty member at Westminster College who did some analysis on the juvenile pelicans. And Jim Van Leeuwen. Jim Van Leeuwen is a biologist with Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program. He's driven more miles on Great Salt Lake in a boat than I think anybody, and John Luft and Kyle Stone. So,
and thanks for the introduction, Jaimi. I just like to say I switched my drink to my Pelican mug to be more Great Salt Lake themed. And random story, I went to Snow Basin once on a solo ski day trip, sat next to a random person on a lift, and it was the guy who made this mug. So I know him if you want to be hooked up with a Pelican mug.
That is awesome.
Okay, so the first time, so I'm from Illinois, and when I moved here for this job and saw pelicans flying above me, I was seriously amazed that these gigantic birds that I associated either with the ocean or with giant lakes like Lake Michigan or the Great Lakes was here in the desert. You can see them flying high in the air, especially during the summer here in Utah. They've been documented to fly up to 30,000 feet in the air. They are really big birds, so you can see them when they're flying high. A lot of the times when they're flying super high, they're actually catching thermals and using that warm air to get high so that they can get to other feeding grounds over mountains. You'll often see them together too because they're gregarious. And like I said, they are very big. They can range anywhere from 11 to 20 pounds. When pelicans are flying, especially during migration, they will be tethered to fresh water like lakes, rivers, and reservoirs, and that's because they eat things like fish and crustaceans. This image is data taken from pelicans that were captured around Great Salt Lake, either Gunnison Island or its wetlands, and you can see they go all over the place. So it used to be theories that the pelicans at Great Salt Lake were only coming from west of the Colorado or the Rocky Mountain Range, and you can see this orange line is a pelican that flew way east. So what I really want you to take away from this image is how Great Salt Lake is a hub, and these pelicans are coming and going from Great Salt Lake all over the United States and North America. They come to Great Salt Lake because they rely on it not only for foraging and eating our fish in our wetlands, but also for breeding. So this is a map of Great Salt Lake. The two main reasons why pelicans come here are pointed to and circled. So you see over here, Great Salt Lake wetlands provide a lot of food for pelicans, and then they also use Gunnison Island in the North Arm in that pink water for breeding. So this is a photo taken by a friend of mine called Laura Bingham. She takes awesome pictures of birds and goes birding all the time. And when she sent me this, I asked her if I could use it tonight. It's a picture of pelicans foraging in Farmington Bay. And what's really cool about how pelicans feed is they'll create a big circle around each other, kind of encircling the fish, and then move towards shallower water to capture them. So pelicans are often found not only around Great Salt Lake wetlands, but also at Strawberry Reservoir and other reservoirs in northern Utah. Surveys conducted by the Division of Wildlife during mid-September in 1997 estimated over 85,000 pelicans using Great Salt Lake wetlands for foraging and loafing. Not only do they come to the wetlands of Great Salt Lake, but they also come to Gunnison Island, where I pointed to in that north pink water. Aerial accounts conducted by the Division of Wildlife has shown up to 20,000 breeding pelicans on the island. The average is more around 10, 11,000, but this is the highest count that we've had. It's really surprising that you'll find this many pelicans and honestly seagulls out on the island because it's surrounded by this hypersaline water that ranges from 25 to 29% salinity, and there's literally rocks of salt when you pull up to the island. It doesn't seem like any life would be there, but as soon as you pull up to the island, you are immersed in thousands and thousands of seagulls, and when you get there, you will also see lots of pelicans. So it's a really cool, special place, and it's preserved as a WMA through the state. These are aerial photos of pelicans on Gunnison Island. They arrive in May or March-ish, May through May for breeding to find their breeding pairs. And these photos are actually from our annual aerial surveys, which happen from a plane. They've been conducting consistent, regular surveys of Gunnison Island since 1980 to get an idea of the pelican population. So this graph is some of the most recent data compiled that we have on pelican population. The blue line is Great Salt Lake elevation. You can see it goes up and down. It seems like it kind of mirrors the gray bars, which are the number of pelicans from those aerial accounts I'm telling you about. And then this dotted line is the land bridge threshold where Gunnison Island is no longer an island, which Jaimi touched on a little bit about that and in the book about climate change too. So the most recent data that John Neill sent me today concluded that there's about 9,040 breeding population this year in 2020 on the island. So a little bit lower than the overall average, but the bar would look something like this, so a little bit higher than last year. These aerial surveys are done in May to get an idea of the breeding population, and then also they come back in July when those juvenile pelicans are big enough to see what the success was of those nesting pelicans. So that's been able to give biologists a good idea of nest productivity on the island. Originally, they estimated way back in the day that it was like 70% success, but it's actually quite a bit lower than that just because of likely the harsh environment that they're living in. Another question biologists have had is, where are these pelicans going and coming to from Gunnison Island? This has been taken care of, I guess, in two parts. One part's a Mark-Ree site, and another part I'll tell you about is satellite data. The Mark-Ree site study involves biologists actually going out to the island. Most of the time we can get there by boat. Sometimes the water level's so low we have to take ATVs. They've been doing this, I believe, since 2011 or maybe 13. I might have to check that again. But when they get to the island, they'll actually put these fences up and corral the pelicans by surrounding them and just kind of getting them to group up together, trying to do it the least stress possible and as quickly as possible until they're corralled in this fence. The goal of the day is to get 500 pelicans. We want to give them wing tags and metal leg bands. So these patagial wing tags are put on the part of their arm that I guess is the patagia, and that's the area that actually won't harm them and they should be able to fly away. And then the metal leg band is also a backup as an individual like ID so that we can tell what pelican this was if we find it later. From 2011 to 2019, 3,714 juvenile pelicans have been tagged and banded. Once they're tagged and banded, they're set free from the corral to go off onto the island and hopefully be resighted later. Since then, there's been about 432 unique resightings, or about 12% of total tagged pelicans. Now, there have been about 750 actual resightings, but some of those are the same pelican multiple times. So these 432 are the ones that are unique individual pelicans. Fortunately, 187 of those were actually resighted alive, which is really cool. People have sent in really awesome pictures. This one from KS Nature Photography I thought was awesome. It shows both wing tags and the leg band. Unfortunately, about 238 of the pelicans have been found dead since the tagging began. Whether it's left on the island like they never made it off the island, a tag maybe fell off of a pelican, it just didn't stay on. Maybe they got stuck in the tar seeps, which I'm sure Jaimi could tell you more about. Or a lot of the time they're found around Promontory Point or Spiral Jetty. It's often a juvenile pelican trying to make it to a feeding ground like Bear River Bay, and they just didn't have enough energy that year to make it. The cool part of this study is it's given biologists a lot of data on where pelicans are going to after they leave Gunnison Island. You can see the pelicans found alive are the gold stars and the dead are the pink stars, which obviously there's a lot of the dead ones found around Great Salt Lake from the pelicans that just couldn't make it on their first journey to get food. So if you want to get out there and look for a pelican with a wing tag, that would be awesome. You can report it to reportban.gov, the date and general area where you cited it's the most important, and a picture is a super extra bonus. I'm not sure, I didn't want to say you could email John Neill, so he can correct me if I'm wrong, but you could probably also email John Neill. This way is also super efficient. I've done it once before when I spotted one, and you even get a little certificate. So going back to this data of where pelicans are going to and coming from, the reason why we have a lot of this data is because the airport has funded the Division of Wildlife to figure out if the pelicans on Gunnison Island are causing an issue for the airport. As you know, Salt Lake City International Airport is really close to Great Salt Lake, and pelicans can be a serious concern for airport hazard control. Like I said in the beginning, they can fly up to almost 30,000 feet. They're really big birds and they weigh a lot, so they can cause some damage. In fact, Utah has reported 7 airplane collisions as of 2019 at their airport, 3 of which have caused substantial damage. So it's a serious issue, and because of that, there is a big partnership between the airport, the Endangered Species Mitigation Fund, the U.S. Army Dugway Proving Ground, Tracy Aviary, and the Division to put some satellite transmitters on pelicans. So it basically involves capturing an adult pelican and then fitting it with this backpack you can see over here in the right. It's small enough to allow them to fly and leave the area, and then we can get some really great data on it. In 2012, and then also between 2015 and 2018, 68 pelicans were fitted with GPS backpacks. You can check out this map here. Where is it? And other maps like it. So each line is an individual pelican, like named Abigail or Bartholomew. And if you go to this website or simply Google PeliTrack, you can actually check that data out yourself and even pick a pelican to follow. So the data, if you zoom in closer to Great Salt Lake, is really interesting. Actually, so far it seems like the pelicans from Gunnison Island aren't necessarily the ones loafing and foraging by the airport, but instead are going on trips to places like Bear River Bay and Strawberry Reservoir. Like I said, they go to these places to feed and then bring back food to their young on Gunnison Island. Surveys conducted by the division show over 85,000 pelicans using it for foraging. So it's important to remember that not only are there 20,000 breeding pelicans on the island, but there's also a lot of non-breeding pelicans that really rely on water in Great Salt Lake and its wetlands for food. I also wanted to point out, with what little time I have left, that the division does do more than just the breeding surveys. The Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program and the other wetland managers will do surveys often by airboat and try and get a count of how many non-breeding and just pelicans are using and utilizing the Great Salt Lake wetlands. As Bonnie touched on in the beginning, and the theme of the book is Great Salt Lake, a time and change, and the way that this could affect pelicans in particular is by not only increasing salinity in their wetlands where they rely on fish to eat, but also creating a land bridge to their island, which has happened in the past years. And like Jaimi was talking about, those pelican images have shown predators like coyotes able to reach the island. So we are concerned about water getting to Great Salt Lake for these pelicans. 20% of their breeding population is on this island. They kind of have all their eggs in one basket here in Utah. And if we continue to see a land bridge and more drought and causing problems with their food in the wetlands, we would be really concerned about at least the pelicans here in Utah. With that, I just want to say thank you, and thank you for listening. I put John Neill's contact information up here. He's the avian biologist and expert on all of this. And then my email if you have any further questions. Thanks, Jaimi.
Thank you, Ashley. Hey, Seth Horowitz, are you around? I asked you to talk, and I'm hoping that you don't mind me putting you on the spot. So Oh, and first, before I do that, I realized, Ashley, I apologize. I forgot to read your bio because I was all excited about pelicans.
Oh, it's boring anyway.
No, it's so cool. Actually, I do have a fun fact about Ashley also that I learned. She was the mascot for her high school, which is like pretty unique. And I found that out because we were working together on a talk, and it turns out that I was the mascot for my high school. I was the Spartan woman at Murray High School. What were you, Ashley? What was, I can't remember.
I was a rocket ship.
I had to wear pleather. It was awful.
Yeah.
So Ashley Kijowski is a wildlife biologist at the Great Salt Lake Ecosystem Program within the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. In her position, she is a part of a team that manages the commercial brine shrimp fishery to ensure parity among harvesters and control the harvest to ensure ecosystem needs are met. She is a past board member of Friends of Great Salt Lake and recently authored this chapter in the book, Great Salt Lake Biology. She has a bachelor's degree from Illinois State University in biology and environmental science, and a master's degree from the University of South Dakota in ecology, with a focus on invertebrate community ecology and conservation. So I just wanted to make sure that I read that because I omitted that. And I'm wondering if Seth is here. So Seth is my friend who is an open water swimmer, and his dish, he actually won this dish, the best Great Salt Lake themed dinner with brine shrimp jumbo cis in orange slick. And it's, how do you say it? Are you here? Are you here, Seth?
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yeah, welcome. So tell me about your dinner.
Well, it was chana masala, so I made like chickpeas, Indian style chickpeas, I guess.
Awesome. Hey, tell me, you said something about how the brine shrimp cysts stick in your wetsuit. Tell me more about that.
Well, in my bathing suit, yeah. Like I tend to, when I swim and there's a lot of cysts around, I take off my bathing suit and there's this really gross, slimy, orange cysts. So I guess the bathing suit acts like a Gore-Tex sack, like when the brine shrimpers go and collect the brine shrimp.
So tell me more about what it feels like to have shrimp in your swimming suit.
I don't notice it. It's just sort of a little treat I have. So I convince my wife not to come swimming with me when I show it to her.
Can I just ask you, why did you decide to swim 92 days in Great Salt Lake?
It just sort of got under my skin. So this spring, when all the pools were closed with COVID, I was kind of getting desperate, and I went out there in the spring just to I kind of swam out there once a year for like a special event once a year. And this year I just started going back in April, and it was pretty cold. It was in the low 50s when I started, and I just got addicted to the early morning sunrises and just being out there. I feel like not so much this time of year with the brine shrimpers, but I feel like in most of the summer and spring, at 6 or 7 in the morning, I'm practically the only one in the lake, and it's just super peaceful and amazing.
Awesome. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot.
Yeah, I feel inadequate with all these smart scientists, but I'm happy to share my experience. Anybody want to come swimming, just let me know. Jaimi can put you in touch.
Wait, do you feel comfortable putting your blog in the chat?
Oh, sure. I'll share my little story.
Okay.
I'll put the link out there.
And Seth is also going to be in the, he wrote a story about his swimming that will be in the Friends of Great Salt Lake newsletter. Do you know when that will be published?
She said she was working on it this month, but I'm not sure when.
Awesome. Hey, Seth, thank you. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot and for telling us about brine shrimp and swimming.
You're welcome.
Okay, so I think, it's 7:30 now, and I really think that we should think about questions and answers. And so if all of the panelists will turn on their videos, we'll start asking questions. The first question, that's been upvoted is from Lynn. Do the human impacts to the lake affect the susceptibility of Great Salt Lake birds to diseases like avian cholera?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and try to answer that. It's kind of both a yes and a no answer. Avian cholera typically affects the eared grebes on the Great Salt Lake, and recently we haven't been seeing that many die-offs from avian cholera, but often when we do, it will be around up to 1% of the grebe population out there. So even though it's not a large impact on the population, it can affect up to 40,000 eared grebes. Avian botulism is another common disease out on Great Salt Lake. And prior to the formation of the Bear River Bird Refuge, there was a lot of die-offs from avian botulism. And one of the, with some of the numbers of birds that died off from that were approaching 1 million birds, mostly waterfowl. But part of the reason we did create the Bear River Migratory Bird Refuge was to try to stop those die-offs from happening. And since then, we haven't had as big a die-offs from avian botulism. So we're some of our management is leading to less die-offs from avian botulism. But the lower lake levels have a consequence too, because they concentrate the birds in certain areas. And birds like Farmington Bay, which has a lot of nutrients coming in that the microinvertebrates feed on, and the birds really come to Farmington Bay to eat those microinvertebrates in high numbers. So they can be really concentrated in Farmington Bay. And avian botulism in particular likes anoxic conditions, where if you get a lot of macroinvertebrates that are dying off under the wet mud, you can have a really concentrated die-off from those birds.
Cool, thank you, John. I have a question for Ella. Ella, Wayne Wurtzbaugh wants to know, I'm curious why Phalaropes are grouped with the shorebirds. I normally see them out in the open waters of Farmington or Gilbert Bays, and I can't remember seeing any wading along the shore.
Red-necked Phalarope, they're considered shorebirds because it's the class that they're in. But as the red-necked Phalaropes are more pelagic, but Wilson's Phalaropes, I often see them from open water. They'll actually go up on the shoreline and feed along the shoreline. I have some really good photos of them actually snapping brine flies standing on the shoreline. So they're more land-loving, but they're shorebirds just because that's the class that they're put in.
I have another question. This is from Anne Neville. Ella, do you think the lack of understanding about the habitats that shorebirds use is threatening the protection of these habitats?
I think so. I think that the focus has been for a long time on freshwater marshes, and the shorebirds use the more shallow water. They use they'll go anywhere from, depending upon the species, from dry mud flats, moist mud flats, and most of them are in less than 7 inches. This habitat hasn't received a whole lot of focus, and yet they are, the playas and the shallow edges around the lake are the ones that are being lost to development. and Phragmites is also inundating the shorebird mud flats. So I think people not focusing on the needs of their habitat does lead to a, we just need to focus more on shorebirds and their habitats and their needs.
Cassandra Perry wants to know, what are your thoughts concerning implication of the state's inland port plans on Great Salt Lake and migratory birds? I think Ella might have some input.
Yeah, on the inland port, this is a massive 16,000 acre development, the lights, the habitat loss. I have been actually working with the inland port on, we're trying to preserve a buffer of 4,000 acres between the port and 20,000 acres of duck clubs, ISSR, so we're making attempts, but yes, and it's not just the inland port. I live in West Valley City and drive from about 35th South along 5600 South, and that whole entire area that has been, in wet years, there are birds all over it. And, we're all focused on the inland port, but the development is massive and it's everywhere. But we're doing the best we can. We can't stop the horrific impacts, but we can certainly make an effort to lessen those impacts for lights. And, I'm setting up, Heidi's going to present to the inland port on lights. We're setting up a water policy committee that's with Salt Lake City and the inland port, and Ann Neville is going to be on that. I'm going to be on it, Jeff Denblaker. So we're doing everything we can, but what can I say? You put down 16,000 acres and yes, there are huge impacts to the port.
Well, does anybody have more questions here? We've answered the questions that we have in there now. Does anybody have more questions?
I love that Dave Richards says urban lights attract adult midges at their detriment.
Yeah, and urban lights, when the midges come there, they aren't any birds around to eat them.
I've inhaled a few midges before, Ella, have you?
Actually, I have. At least they don't bite like mosquitoes.
Yeah, they are.
And they definitely are a major source of food for shorebirds. Bloodworms in the larva forms, they're very, very important. And
it's so awesome to have you bird people here. I've learned so much, and I really appreciate you presenting information, images from your chapters in the book, and it's fabulous.
Well, good. Oh wait, I see another question maybe that came in. What is the difference? This is for Ashley. What is the difference between the pelican wing tags and the backpacks? Either Ashley or John Neill.
I guess I could answer this. So the wing tags they don't have any GPS associated with them. They're just like, if you see a pelican, you have binoculars, you can see the individual number. It'll have, like, let's say H29. You can report that pelican back and we can know where it went. Whereas the backpacks have GPS satellites in them and every hour are pinging their location from satellite transmitting technology. And it actually lets us kind of like watch them live fly, so we can actually see where they go in between each spot. Whereas when they're sighted, we don't know how they got there necessarily.
Ashley, do you have a guess, or do you know how long do those GPS backpacks have batteries? How long does that last?
The ones that they attached to the Pelicans were solar powered, so they were able to recharge, and most of the time when it stopped working, the Pelican died or it fell off. I'm not sure if Neill has any more information on how long they last, but that's my understanding.
Yeah, I think the manufacturer tells us about 4 years, but we haven't really been seeing that, mainly because, yeah, they stop working or the pelican dies or it just falls off.
And I know that Amy Van Tatenhove is on here. And if you want to, she's a PhD student at Utah State University that has a Fritz Knopp Fellowship where that was donated by the late Fritz Knopp, who studied pelicans on Gunnison Island in the 1970s, I think 72 to 75, something like that. She might know more, but I don't know if she's here to answer that question or not.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm not sure if you can hear me.
Oh yeah, I can hear you. I'm sorry.
Oh, excellent.
I put you on the spot too, Amy.
That's totally fine. Yeah, so John answered it and Ashley answered it really well. But we actually put out 2 more transmitters, refurbished transmitters this year. So hopefully they'll last a little bit longer. We'll see.
And what are there plans for new ones next year? Or I mean, I know that the pandemic has impacted your ability to get new transmitters.
Yeah, so that's actually, we have a handful of transmitters that I don't know if they're in production yet or if, we've sort of got those, in the works. But we couldn't really do a lot of field work this summer. But hopefully next year we'll have, good 10 or 15 more transmitters to put out if everything goes well.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for hi, Amy. Thank you for letting me put you on the spot.
Not a problem.
Max Malmquist, he works for National Audubon. He wants to know, he thinks it's a strange question. I've heard a lot of people ask this. Has anybody thought of building an artificial island in the North Arm as a backup for the pelicans? Or do they have too much site fidelity? Do they, go back to Gunnison every time? Or could we make an artificial island?
That's a pretty good question. I haven't actually heard that proposal. It's certainly a possibility. Back in the early 1900s, early 2000, in 1896, Alfred Lambourne tried to homestead on Gunnison Island. And he got there in November, and the next spring when the pelicans start to arrive, some of those birds actually left Gunnison and went to Hat Island to breed. So I think it's possible that they could set up shop somewhere else nearby, but I'm not sure if anybody's actually thought about that.
I know at Mono Lake, their gulls, I can't remember what kind of gulls, they had a gull population that was nesting on an island, and they, I believe, built either a trench or a fence around it so that they could protect them. I don't know if you know, John.
Yeah, on Mono Lake, the lake got pretty low, so there's land bridge, and so they decided to put up an electric fence. It turned out to be pretty long and expensive, but they did that and it worked, and lake has come up and the gulls have re-nested there. Gulls are a little more easy to nest, but pelicans are really susceptible to disturbance, so we'd probably need a big fence for Gunnison if that were to work for here.
Yeah. While you're still on, Valerie wants to know, what's the oldest pelican that you've recorded?
I think the oldest one is about 4 years. We've had some issues with our wing tags. They actually become brittle and will crack and fall off. But I think our oldest known one was 4 years.
Did you find one with a band on it that was 20 years that you could, with a leg band?
Uh,
That was from like North Dakota or something?
I think that's the one you found, Jaimi. Yeah, Minnesota. And it was, yeah,
I remember.
it was just a band. I don't think it was on a leg, but we don't know how long it was there to begin with. But yeah, it was 23 years old when that band had been put on a pelican in the Midwest, and eventually ended up on Gunnison Island where it died.
And
I wanted to say a quick shout out to Max, because you mentioned Max, but he is responsible for some of the photographs that are in Ella's chapter. He helped gather those from Audubon photographers, and I really appreciate his help with that.
Yeah, I might say he did that, and all of the photos were from local. They weren't Audubon photos; they were actually
Local photographers.
Local photographers, and on the photographs were on the Great Salt Lake. And if you notice, we chose not to do the avocet that everybody uses.
Yes, I know.
But we chose to use, the photographers were actually great because they took what is often considered as drab shorebirds, and the beauty of these shorebirds really came out in their photographs. So we are thankful to Max and to all the photographers that contributed to that.
Yes, and I think Ella was speaking of drab. You were okay for them to be in their winter plumage as well, which I
Yeah,
thought.
the black-bellied plovers, you always see them in their beautiful summer, but we do have those 3 in flight from Cameron Cox.
Incredible.
That's just incredible in their winter plumage.
It's incredible. I also wanted to say a word that Kyle Stone is in the audience, and he says, I'm currently analyzing the Pelitrack data, and it seems that about 2 breeding seasons after the initial summer of tagging, he's working on that. So I wanted to mention that he was commenting in case you didn't see it.
thank you. I do have a question from Wendy Roberts, my friend Wendy Roberts. How significant is the impact of heavy metals on the various populations of birds in the lake? So is there a difference between, you know, the impact on shorebirds or nesting birds or pelagic birds?
If I could say something really fast on that topic, my knowledge here is quite limited. The little bit I do know is that our observation in the chapter is that we don't yet have any observations of ill effects on the pelagic birds from these heavy metals. It was mainly a concern that with the concentration of the waters as they decrease, that it could become. And I think I might have misrepresented or misspoke saying that a bunch of heavy metals are coming from the mine tailings. Wayne Wurtzbaugh pointed out in the comments that that's not a current issue. These heavy metals do come into the lake, but they come through the other wetlands and through the other water sources. And currently, from what I understand, it's not a huge threat. Maybe Ella or John would know more on that though.
I'll mention a little something. The Utah Health Department currently has a health advisory for eating 3 species of waterfowl. Those are common goldeneye, cinnamon teal, and northern shoveler. Those recommendations were established back in 2004 or 5, I believe. But for the birds themselves, there's not much evidence that it affects them while they're here at Great Salt Lake.
And I will say that our next Salty Science seminar does have to do with mercury in Great Salt Lake. It's on December 17th. A wonderful human who is on this call is Abby Scott. Abby Scott was one of our students and was the one of the authors on the chapter about mercury in Great Salt Lake. So on December 17th, you can hear more about mercury with some reference to the birds too.
Yeah, except Abby pulls for Kansas and we have a basketball problem.
Oh, I had to filter myself. I know Abby too well. I have a really awesome question from Anne Neville. To end this up, we're about 10 minutes until our end. For each presenter, what research would you like to see to answer any burning questions that you have? One question, not questions, one question. What research would you like to see?
I would love to know how mosquito abatement is affecting the macroinvertebrate communities in the wetlands.
And I would echo sort of an echo of Ashley's. I think for us to understand the macroinvertebrates, what the shorebirds are eating, understand better why two areas that look exactly the same to the eye, the vegetation, the water depth, and things like that, why birds are feeding, obviously because there are macroinvertebrates there, and other areas that look exactly the same do not have macroinvertebrates. And I might say to Ashley, we are Audubon, Gilmore Sanctuary is looking to actually do some studies with mosquito abatement on impacts to birds. We've made that bridge and are going to pick up a discussion on that issue, which is really, really, really important.
That's really cool. That's awesome.
What about you, Mark? Do you have anything? Like, what's your burning question?
Trying to figure out how to word it, because a lot of the research that I'm working on currently isn't with pelagic birds necessarily. I'm currently focusing a lot on cinnamon teal that nest in the wetlands around Great Salt Lake. And I would like to know more about the impacts that the recent increase in population of raccoons and red foxes, those things that haven't been around for very long here. It's since the 80s that raccoons have really come in. So it'd be nice to know a little bit more about why these areas that used to have hundreds of thousands of cinnamon teal nesting now have so many fewer, if it's simply the raccoons or if it's vegetation changes, other things like that. So,
John, do you have anything?
I'd probably just echo what Ellen and Ashley said. We don't really have a good handle on what the carrying capacity of Great Salt Lake is to migratory birds. So it would be nice to have an idea of which habitats provide the most food availability to those birds, and how many can we actually support here? Are we supporting more than we should be doing, since other saline lakes are drying up in the Intermountain West, or are we drying up as well? Are we reducing our food availability to those migratory birds?
I might throw in another one that echoes Mark on predators, and that is we on Gilmore Sanctuary this summer lost literally hundreds of nesting stilts and avocets to ravens. Explosion of ravens, and it was really heartbreaking to watch the ravens come in and actually zoom in and take the eggs, and then like several of our large colonies of hundreds of avocets were lost. And nobody even really realizes ravens are such great predators on birds, but they are.
And so, I mean, we have 5 minutes, and I think that's a good place to kind of end things. And I think I would just like to echo what people have been talking about, that Great Salt Lake is for the birds. 338 species of birds, and over 10 million birds that come here every year. And so, you know, I know when Bonnie and I were planning this book and editing this book, we really wanted to think about these charismatic creatures and how you know, less water was going to impact these birds, and increasing salinity and all of these rippling effects that will happen. And it's not just to the birds, right? We wanted to really start to think about how that will affect humans, and it's not just going to affect birds, but a decreasing and dewatering of Great Salt Lake is going to impact humans, both our economy, our recreation, our quality of life, and our health. And I'm so glad to have Ella as a mentor to keep telling me, it's about the birds, bring it back to the birds. We need to be thinking about the birds, and what affects birds affects people. And so I just want to thank Mark and Ella and John and Ashley and Bonnie. Dave Parrott is our assistant director that's been hanging out. I put Amy and Seth on the spot, and I just want to thank everybody for coming. This is going to be recorded and will be online on our YouTube channel. The next Salty seminar is going to be about the lizards. There's no amphibians, there's lizards and snakes, reptiles on Antelope Island. And then we'll think about the mercury that is in Great Salt Lake.